That's right. So we're gonna start close to on time anyway. I'm Mary Beth Lakin. I'm the Director of College and University Partnerships at ACE in the Center for Education Attainment and Innovation, which is a mouthful. That's our new center title. And I've got my two colleagues here. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and then I'm going to kind of let you do a shout out so I can see where you're from and who you are. So to my right.
So I'm Dawn Garcon. I'm a teaching professor at the University of Missouri St. Louis and the coordinator of the Pediatric Nurse Practitioner Program. I have been doing ACE reviews since the early 2000s. I've done both military and credit reviews, obviously primarily focusing on healthcare.
I'm George Bowler. I'm in the College of Business at Lipscomb University in Nashville, Tennessee. Teach in marketing primarily, and I'm one of the national coordinators for the credit side of American Council on Education, and also do military reviews. I've actually been doing reviews since the 1980s.
And he looks so young still, doesn't he? Right? And so let's introduce another one of our colleagues who's doing a session tomorrow, and she made a comment in the earlier session. Eve, would you stand up and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Eve Howard, and I'm one of the associate directors at ACE, and I work on the military side of the house. As I said, facilitating reviews, and I've done one credit review, so I'm familiar with their process as well. And looking forward to talking to you guys tomorrow.
Okay, so let's do some quick down and dirty introductions from the audience. So how many of you here are faculty? Raise your hand. Good. How many are academic advisors? You may raise your hand more than once on some of these. Okay. How about transfer coordinators? How about program directors? How about admissions? How about prior learning assessment coordinators? How about none of the above? Okay, so who are you and why are you here?
Veterans Affairs?
Good. Okay, who else is Veterans Affairs? Okay. What other roles or programs?
Academic affairs, student life.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, good. Anything else?
I'm the president of
Well, welcome. Which university?
Columbus State.
Go Columbus State. And how many of you are here from two-year institutions? Okay. Four-year? Both? Okay. All right. Okay. Well, we wanted to do some myth-busting today, and so, you know, I could probably go over some of the top 10 myths there are about the ACE Credit Review, but I'll just do a couple because, I'll do one because I think this session really addresses that. So maybe one of the top myths about ACE reviews is that people like me and Eve sit in our office at ACE and we go through the curriculum and we decide what's going to get credit recommendations. Not true. Never has been true, never will be true. So that's if anybody had that, I'll call it conception, but it's a misconception and a myth. If you have that, so we'll walk you through a little bit of it from a national coordinator's point of view, who's also been a reviewer, a faculty reviewer, and a faculty reviewer point of view. And then tomorrow, if you need more detail, we're doing in the morning what we call review in a box, and we're going through 3 different kinds of reviews. So for folks that are looking about how reliable and how valid things are, and that's a good thing to look for, this will really help you out. So on our agenda today, we're just going to do some quick things about trends in learning and attainment, particularly what has to do with credit for prior learning. And you may have some things you want to add to our list. Quick ACE overview. Can you hear now? Okay, sorry. I tend to like to move around. I should probably put the mic on, but I'm not going to. And then, as I mentioned before, the credit recommendation process, the review process from a national coordinator's point of view and from the reviewer's point of view as well. Time for you to ask questions and discussions and have discussion with us. And then also, we want to kind of figure out what your next steps are and how we might help you. At every summer, or I was at the Summer Institute in Savannah, but at every institute that I've been at, there's been people trying to come together with concrete actions and next steps. So if you're at one place with doing this, how do you move to the next place with doing it as well? Okay, sound like a plan? All right, let's get going then. So, did I skip something? No, I didn't. Okay. So we know, I mean, you know from being here and being part of the Adult Learning Consortium, you know that there are all sorts of pushes, both at the state and national levels, to increase attainment. And you know that finally states have discovered that adults live in their states and adults need to get degree programs, and so there are all kinds of college complete programs, complete college grants. There are all sorts of grants from groups like Lumina, but then also on the state level and then also on the national level through DOL, through the Department of Labor. A lot of the grants that came out recently with the second round of the TAC grants, there's a PLA component. Anybody that got that grant has to bring in a PLA component. So PLA is hot. And for those of us that have been in the field for umpteen years, we know it's time to strike, that if it's going to happen, all the planets are in alignment now for this to make it happen. So we have nobody to blame but ourselves if we don't make it happen in a good way. So the credit for prior learning piece is an important piece, and as mentioned earlier, I think that there are a lot of trends and initiatives that are really pointing to what Mary Ellen and others were talking about earlier about competency-based education, and certainly credit for prior learning points us in that direction. And Eve gave a really great example through military occupation. So we at ACE know that, or ACE, as those of you who've been out in the field for a while may still refer to us, ACE or ACE, we have a good foundation through the military occupations, and really looking at related competencies. So that's something we know we need to look at in terms of all the kinds of reviews that we do, whether it's a training for a formal course, whether it's a certification through Microsoft, whether it's our latest and greatest venture, I wouldn't say greatest, but latest adventure and probably really interesting venture, and that's, we just finished a review of MOOCs, that's massive, open online, always mix the O's up, courses. And we did this with an organization called Coursera for 5 courses. And the credit recommendations range from a developmental math course, which would only get vocational credit, to an upper division biology course that would get 2 elective credits. And there's more information on our national guide about the organization, as well as the credit recommendation. So for those of you that are more interested in more detail on that, you can find that online, and we're happy to talk more about that in the question and answer session, as well as in sessions tomorrow that we're going to provide. So what the reviews of things like military occupations to MOOCs, what we're seeing over the 60 years, more than 60 years that we've been doing this, are that things change. They don't stay the same. Things change on the military side of the house in terms of occupations. They change in terms of the training. They change in terms of how they're delivered, change in terms of how they're assessed, and that certainly happens on the corporate side. So one of the things that we have to be very aware of and pay attention to is, on the one hand, credit for prior learning we know is not universally accepted, right? We know that there's a long way to go with that. And on the other hand, which is kind of a paradox, we in the credit for prior learning field can become very staid in what we do, whether it's with exam or portfolio. So some of these new venues for learning and this focus on competency-based education really challenges us not only to find ways to help people understand what credit for prior learning is, but get around the curve and kind of be ahead of the game and looking at what's out there and how we're going to assess it. Because we're going to continue to be challenged not only by the things that have come to us along for the past 30 years, but sort of these new kinds of things like MOOCs and badges. How many people have heard badges on their campus? So we've got all this stuff coming out. So what is it? Where does it come from? How do we assess it? How do we make sure that it means anything, whether it's in the workplace or on a college campus or both? So as I like to say, with all this stuff coming along, whether it's a state mandate or a MOOC, we're ACE and we're here to help you. So, and if you know that we're from Washington, D.C., you can appreciate that even more, right? So enough of that. I just stuck up a few reasons why credit for prior learning. And I think a lot of folks, when we were listening to the students earlier on, there were obviously reasons for why credit for prior learning. And I think for me, the piece that's really important here is that, and I think was so well demonstrated by the students who spoke this afternoon, is that they all come to us in different ways with different kinds of experiences. And so we've got to figure out different ways to evaluate those experiences. We can't stay stuck on one thing. I started out in portfolio. When I got to Old Dominion University in an area where there were 500,000 people connected to the military, either as active duty service members, family members, or veterans, I really got to know about the ARTS and the SMART transcript pretty darn fast. And Old Dominion, of course, was doing a really good job along the years articulating that, so that each and every person who came in, you didn't have to do a one-off evaluation or one-on-one, that there were things that could be through the training that were validated through the transcripts, that were good fits for particular programs and could be articulated like you were articulating credit from another college. So boy, did that help us out. And you can imagine what a pain it was with the banner system years ago to put all of that into place. And people were groaning and moaning and crying and wanting to go on vacation and having nervous breakdowns left and right. But we got it done, and it continues to be improved and built on. And so doing that, making that kind of move along for students enables you to do the kinds of things I think that folks were talking about earlier today that are important to do. There are some things that aren't documented. There are some things that you don't have a certification for. So how can you have the time and the thought to put into some kind of challenge exam or performance or portfolio? So is there anything else? This was just my brief list thinking about it. Is there anything else you would like to add to this list about, from your point of view, why credit for prior learning? And shout outs are allowed in here. Allowed and encouraged. So I must be brilliant. I covered it all, right? If you think of something later. So ACE is about 100 years old now. We're approaching our 100th anniversary. And one of the things that I just want to say about ACE, among all the other things that it does and has done over the years, is, for me, a really important thing about ACE, to know about ACE, is that it started because of veterans. And it was the concern of the higher education community about what was going to happen for World War I veterans and their transition. How were they going to get education? How were they going to get jobs? And so out of those first efforts, the higher education community created pathways for those veterans. And the ways in which they created pathways, we know today, fast forward to 2013, we know as the GED, we know as CLEP, we know as ART, SMART, and so forth. Don't want to forget the Coast Guard either. And we do a little bit of evaluation or review of Community College of the Air Force. Earlier, there was a mention about Community College of the Air Force, And the reason we are not doing a lot of reviews with them like we do with other services is because they have their own community college that's regionally accredited. And so that can hopefully make transfers more smooth for folks that have credit recommendations that fit with programs. I mentioned this new long name that we have for our center. In ACE, we were recently the Center for Lifelong Learning. We've probably gone through, over the years, at least 5 or 6 name changes. But this really is focused because I think our earlier focus of the organization, like a lot of folks that are working with students, is how do we get them in? And we didn't think so much about what happened when they got there and if they got out. So this, along with everybody else, ACE is focused on what happens once they get there. You know, for example, how does credit for prior learning really map out to a degree program? How is it used? How does it help people complete? How does it motivate them? So that's one part of the package that we're really thinking about. These 2 programs have been with us over the years. Since 1945, we have reviewed military training, and then in the mid-'70s, we started reviewing the occupations. And Eve gave us a little bit of a history in the early session about, you know, we're updating ourselves. So Eve, you were mentioning in the past 5 years, then we've really been adding those competencies to the occupation. So in the 70s, we started reviewing the occupations. At the same time, we started looking at the corporate side, what we call the corporate side of the house. So we were already doing the military training courses. We then began to do occupations in the 70s, and then we started doing what we call the corporate side, which is, it's a big umbrella. It means a lot of different areas, and you'll see, some of you are probably familiar with what we do with transcript services, and you can learn more about that tomorrow as well as what we have, the guides online. Many of you who are were born somewhere near the time that I was born, and you're working on campuses, you remember those, what I used to call the big Bibles, the ACE Bibles. You know, that there were thousands of pages, and you open to find a credit recommendation. Well, all that's online now, and it's just much easier to use, and we keep thinking of ways to streamline it all the time. So before we get right to George, here's just a little bit about review teams, and that was mentioned earlier, I believe, that faculty are key to the review. And George is going to talk a bit more about that from a coordinator's point of view. We have faculty from every kind of accredited institution, 2-year, 4-year, public, private, for-profit, non-profit. We have right now about 895 active faculty reviewers in our database. And I'll do a plug right now. We are always looking for faculty reviewers, particularly in areas like cybersecurity, allied health, foreign language. Do you guys want to add anything else? What's the military looking for now? Can you?
Culinary, hotels, management, you name it. I mean, the military pretty much has parallel from whatever you guys are doing out there in the school.
So in setting up a review team, even before we do that, when the military comes to us and says in their contract, for these service branches, we want you to review this, or on the corporate side, if American Bankers Association comes to us and says, we want you to look at our training, our certifications, then at ACE, we've got to review what that curriculum is, so we can put those teams together, and we can pull from that database what that team is going to look like and make sure that we represent all the disciplines that are going to be part of that review. So that's kind of the first step to that. And this gives you just a quick look at, we're all over the country, and we're reviewing all kinds of organizations on the corporate side, but we're also reviewing at all kinds of military installations as well. When were we at Fort Benning, or when are we going?
That's coming in the next
Okay. And I'm going to, part,
That's a big review, because they're all Signal and Cyber and Cisco and all that stuff. They've got a lot of
here, we just wanted to give you kind of a cross-section of the kind of reviews we do on the corporate side. And some of these organizations are actually headquartered here in Georgia. So it's anything from employers to professional associations to apprenticeship programs to online education vendors, unions, government agencies. So it's, as I mentioned, it's a big umbrella. So I'm going to turn it over now, and remember, if you've got a question, write it down, because we're going to have time to ask all kinds of questions at the end. So if you've got one from what I've said, just write it down and you'll get a chance to ask it. George?
Has anyone served as a faculty reviewer for ACE? Anybody in the room served on one? Okay, okay, all right. Well, I would encourage you, it's a great experience, and you can go on the ACE website and actually sign up so that submit your information. And you know, they're always looking for new people, so it's a great way to visit a lot of organizations and talk with faculty from other schools, and it's a great process to kind of learn new things and what's going on outside of your own school. The corporate courses and examinations use national coordinators. The military side uses people like Eve to chair or run those reviews. So it's a little bit different from a corporate side to the military side. The Content Review Committee in Washington, as Mary Beth was saying, really looks to put together those teams. And they will look for faculty members from 2-year schools, 4-year schools, different parts of the country to get the different regional accrediting bodies, and to make sure that they've got the content area covered. So they put together those teams and do a good job in helping manage the logistics to get those people to the review sites. And typically teams will have veteran reviewers, and then they may have some new reviewers. And as a national coordinator, one of my jobs is to help train those new people. So when they come along, you know, they come to a review, they've never been to one, they don't exactly know what to do, so we spend some time walking them through the process, putting them with a veteran reviewer so that they can learn the process, review the course with them, and then they'll after their first day, then they're pretty much ready to go and knowing the process. Some reviewers catch on quickly and do a great job. Other reviewers, if they don't catch on quickly or don't do a good job, then one of the jobs that I do as a national coordinator is I'm looking to see, are those people learning the process? Are they really subject matter experts? Are they really going through the materials? Are they working well as a team member? And are they kind of following all of the ACE rules and regulations when it comes to travel? And if they're doing those things, then I write a report and say, hey, it's a great person, use them again. If they're not doing those things, then I may write a report and say, this person did not do well in these particular areas. So that's one of the roles of a coordinator is to look and see who's doing a good job and who's not. The course material, today we find a lot of course material online. We find some in hard copy, regardless of which way it's presented. We review both of those. The reviewers may work independently, looking at a course, and then get together with other reviewers and talk about the course, or sometimes they go through the materials together. It really doesn't matter to me how they do it. It kind of depends on who they are and how they work and what they really enjoy doing. If courses are designed by people other than the instructors who are presenting those courses, then we also review their credentials and their backgrounds. The examination reviews are a little bit different in that we have, generally on our team, we have a psychometrician that's going to be helping us look through the process. And some of the processes that we are looking at when it comes to exam, and I know that the College Board people are here with their CLEP exams that we're familiar with their AP exams that we're familiar with, but there are also organizations across the country that do various types of exams that we may look at. So one of the things that we're looking at, or many of the things that we're looking at processes when it comes to those exams. In other words, what's the process that's used to prepare the test? How are those tests generated? Who are the people who are writing those test items? How are they selected? How are they trained? What's their background? If proctors are used, and we encourage the use of proctors, then how are those proctors selected? How are they trained? How are they evaluated? So we look and see what the proctors are doing. We're also looking to see how often those tests are being updated. So if the test, was last updated 10 years ago, and we say, hey, new material's out, it may be time to update some of those tests. The faculty reviewers look at the learning objectives and how those are covered by the questions. So, we want to make sure that the test questions are covering all of the learning objectives that are supposed to be covered by that exam. The psychometrician is the person who is there looking to make sure that the reliability and validity of those tests are there. And so we rely on those people to help us out there. The team recommendations, we know, of course, should be based on college courses. We sometimes see courses or some training that may not have a college equivalency, and so that may not get any credit. But when we're doing these credit recommendations, we do them in semester hours. We do them in whole numbers. We don't use fractions. So it's going to get one semester hour, 2 semester hours, 3. The credit recommendation must also align with the course objectives as they relate to Bloom's taxonomy. Now, let me give you an example of that. Let's say, for example, someone's got a training course that's entitled Introduction to Something. Let's just pick Introduction to Management. And so as we look through those learning objectives, we're seeing Bloom's very lowest level. We're seeing the remembering stuff, just definition and this type thing. We're seeing assessments that are true, false, and maybe not many of those, or maybe multiple choice, okay? Well, I can tell you that course is not going to get upper division credit, okay? Because it's at the lower level, so that course objective, the assessment method, what's covered in that course, along with the Bloom's taxonomy, has got to be an appropriate level for us to give it some credit recommendation. Now, there are times that courses may not receive credit. If the course is too limited in time and scope. Now, years ago, we were pretty committed to using the time. 45 hours, 45 contact hours is equivalent to 3 semester hours. But we really don't do that anymore because there's so many courses online and training may be abbreviated. And so we're looking at the time, but we're also looking at content. What's in the course? What scope is it covering? How much rigor is it there? So it's not just time, it's time and what's in the course, okay? If a course is too company specific, that really is not found in a college curriculum or it could not be used in any other setting, then it's not going to receive a college credit recommendation. It's just not something that could be used. If the material has no assessment, okay, then it's not going to get a credit recommendation. Now, we are not going to prescribe what type of assessment should be there, okay? We are evaluating what is there. So it might be a written test, essay questions, objective test. It could be some kind of performance-based measurement that we would look at. You know, if it's performance-based, we would look to make sure there's a rubric there that someone is going through and checking off what they're looking for in that performance. It could be some kind of portfolio journal or even a peer evaluation. We're looking to see what types of assessment have been given in that course. So the ACE process is not prescriptive. We don't say, hey, you've got to have a 50 multiple choice question test for this course. You know, we look to see what is there and we evaluate what is there. If we don't feel like it is equivalent to a college level course, then we're not going to give a credit recommendation. And so we're there simply to evaluate what we're seeing. The job of the coordinator is, of course, to keep the team on track, to help make sure that all the materials are there. And today, for a lot of for all the credit reviews that are new, you know, we're having the coordinators go on a pre-site visit to look through and make sure all the materials are there, so that when the team gets there, everything that they need is there. We make sure the team works well together. We make sure that you know, the work is done on time. We assist with any logistical problems that may happen. And of course, we send all the paperwork into ACE in Washington to make sure that you know, the information is going to get into the guide within the 30-day time limit. Now, there are times, I'll tell you one war story, and this was some years ago. There are times that when organizations don't get credit recommendations, they sometimes get a little bit mad, and that's one of the reasons that we've instituted the pre-site visit where the coordinators go out. But we went to a review in another state out west, and this was a training program, small organization that was owned by this one person, and she had hired 2 consultants to actually write all the training programs and to teach these training programs. When we got there, we looked at the materials. They were not college level materials. They were not even good high school level materials. It was garbage. It was junk. So I was in a spot, and so I asked the consultants if they would leave the room, and I told the woman who owned the organization that the training was subpar. It was not even good high school level, and that her consultants were taking advantage of her, and they did not know what they were doing, okay? And that she was not going to get any credit recommendation, and I told her what was wrong with all of the materials that we had been given, okay? Well, like I say, that's one of the reasons we now have pre-site visits, so that we don't have the team there and then go through that. So this was some years ago, and you know, people do get upset when they don't get credit recommendations, but they don't always get credit recommendations. That's just if the content's not there, they don't get it. And normally it's a real pleasure working with these teams, and you know, always learn a lot, and it's always great to hear what people are doing in their different colleges and universities around the country. And of course, we have some really developed really great friendships with these people, because we'll see them on reviews after a time. We'll turn this over to Don.
I wonder if I can, I'm probably not driving the videographer crazy. But let's, ooh.
I'm a wanderer, so I'm going to make your videographer crazy. But I was asked to come here to talk about the faculty perspective, and I heard one of your administrators stating earlier that it is faculty who make credit recommendations. ACE is very much in agreement with that philosophy. It is the faculty members that are on the team that do the review, and it is our recommendation that serves the basis of the ACE credit. It is not made by ACE administrators. It is not made by staff members. It is made by the faculty experts that consist the teams. So our job as faculty members is to then come in and to be grounded in current curricular standards. One of the requirements for ACE is that you cannot be on a team if you are not actively educating students. So if you have retired from an academic position and are no longer in academia, you can no longer serve on ACE teams. So we're all in the trenches with you all doing the same work that you're doing. We bring content expertise. So I'm a nurse practitioner. I've done quite a few of the military reviews. I've been at Fort Benning, at WinSec, because oftentimes our special forces have to have a course in there about what do you do if somebody's arm gets blown off in the field. I've looked at nursing courses. I've been on teams working with ultrasound techs and radiology techs. I've done some leadership because I have a background in leadership, and then I'm a certified mental health specialist, and so I've dealt with some mental health on the military side. On the credit side, I've worked with a number of professional organizations that are healthcare related. And I cannot stress to you enough, and I didn't get this as a faculty member until I started with ACE, but the determination of who goes on the team, they don't put me on the team because I'm a nurse if there's nothing that has anything to do with my expertise. Like, I am not going to go to some specialized dental care program to look at a dental care program. I'm a nurse. I'm not a dentist or a dental technician. So I would not be asked to be on that team because I do not have an expertise that matches the content of the course. And we, as they've said before, we're from all different areas. So there might be someone who's a community college, someone who's at a 4-year degree, somebody like me at the University of Missouri St. Louis. We have undergraduate through doctoral degrees. And it is a multidisciplinary approach. And it's one of the things that I find most fascinating is that I will often sit at a table with a biologist who's looking at an A&P course, and I'm looking at it from the healthcare perspective, and then there's another person who's from another background, because we recognize that that same biology 101, it could be a pre-nursing, a pre-vet, a pre-biology, a pre-whatever. So the teams are put together. So I've actually sat on teams at Fort Benning with an explosive expert. There's a paramedic there, and then I'm there looking at a course that relates to dealing with somebody whose arm got blown off in the field. My job as a faculty member, and these kind of individuals who are professional cat herders, because, you know, faculty members do not go in line often, is to remind us and to constantly be on us that our standards and our recommendations have to reflect the depth and breadth of the content within the course, as well as the curricular standards that are contemporary. So, example, I reviewed a course once where it was a physical assessment course, okay? And if you looked at the course objectives, they had very high-level Bloom's objectives. When you looked at the assessment, there was little to no lab. And I'm sorry, but you can't teach someone how to do a physical exam with a textbook. You have to touch somebody. Sorry, I'm a nurse. I don't buy that argument. And then the exams were all multiple choice. That course didn't get any credit because you had high-level objectives that did not match the assessments and what we would do within an academic setting with including that laboratory component was not there. How are the academic standards considered? We do represent multiple areas. Many of the people on the teams, like I'm a team leader for one of the nursing accreditation organizations. I lead teams for CCNE, which accredits baccalaureate, master, and graduate programs in nursing. I've sat on teams with people who have NL and AC experience, or people that have experience from other accreditors. So we're all grounded, not just in what we're doing in our little house, but what's going on in the big house nationwide. So one of the big differences is, like they said earlier, when I first started in the early 2000s, we would have discussions. Okay, it's a 160-hour course. If you divide that by 16, that's 10 hours a week, you know, carry the one. If it's Tuesday and it's raining, then it's 3, you know. You have to look at what the purpose of the course is. So I did the Army and the Navy Hospital Corpsman course. I reviewed that course, and it was an occupation. These servicemen and women, when they're done with their training, they are the closest equivalent in the civilian world is a nursing assistant, which is kind of ridiculous to me because they're closer to nurses than nursing assistants, but that's a separate discussion. But the job of the Army and the Navy is when they're done with their training, they have to be able to do the job independently without training wheels, be in a nuclear sub or be in a tent in the middle of Afghanistan and do their job. Now, I've been a nurse educator for 15 years. There is not a nurse in this country that gets out of a nursing program that doesn't get babysat for 6 to 12 months after they graduate. So I'm teaching them critical thinking and concepts, and then when they get out in their real job, then the healthcare system of, you know, world's greatest healthcare is going to teach them how to be a nurse their way and get them trained. And so it's the difference between educating someone to thinking versus educating someone to job. And so this hospital corpsman course had 1,500 hours in it. Well, a medical assistant or an EMT program might only have 35 credit hours. It makes absolutely no sense to give somebody 50 credits for a program that in the community is only going to be a 34 credit course. So we sit and we look at curricula from multiple institutions across the country and say, what are real world institutions? What do their degrees look like? What types of courses do they have? And how do I take this training as I'm leafing through these lesson assignments and the training and the assessment and the skills that they're required to document? I'm going beyond, you have to have 70% for undergraduate and 80% for graduate. But I'm going beyond that to say, okay, they have all of this, but in the real world, this is what's getting taught. And many of you may have noticed then the credits that are coming out are a lot more reflective of the types of titles and content that you see in modern curricula, where before it was almost like, you know, we gave this broad kind of category that you'd look at it, and I'd get a transcript of somebody who wanted to be a nurse practitioner, because that's what I do. And I would look at it and I'd go, well, I don't know what this description means. How does that break out? That sounds like a piece of this class or a piece of that class. And then, as already stated, if I'm in a credit institution and Supermart Company is training people on Supermart, their way of doing things, their way of scanning barcodes, their internal policies and procedures, that has absolutely no applicability beyond Supermart. And so that's going to be looked at very differently than if Supermart is teaching general business principles or general healthcare concepts, et cetera. If it is specific to Starbucks' way of making a latte, it's probably not going to get credit because Oklahoma Coffee Company or whoever might make their lattes differently than Starbucks. And if it's not that theoretical discussion that we have within an academic setting, it's not going to translate. So our charge is a very serious one for those of us who are faculty members, because when we leave the room, we tell them. The faculty members are the ones that when you read your printout and it says what subjects were covered and what objectives did the course have and what types of assessment were done, we write that. They don't write that. A faculty team with a minimum of 2 to 3 reviewers has looked at each one of these courses from an interdisciplinary perspective, and we have said, this is what is in this course. And we tell them, and then that then gets published. So it's our job to make sure that the credit that comes out is truly reflective of what is in there. And I do not exaggerate to you, ladies and gentlemen, that it is more common than not that I am sitting in a room for 10 hours looking at one course. I'm not looking at 4 courses, I'm looking at one course. And when we go to these institutions that have multiple courses, I'm sometimes there 3 days, putting in 10, 11, 12-hour days, because we get in the weeds. Because our charge is to make sure that that recommendation that comes out is faculty-driven and truly reflective of the process. All right, so I can sit. I don't have to wander anymore. That's what happens when you fly in from Missouri, that, we've all had lunch. It's that time in the afternoon. I have to move.
So maybe a couple of things to mention, and then folks can ask questions. One of the things I don't think any of us remember to mention is those teams have to come to 100% consensus for that credit recommendation to become official and go forward. So, see, that makes George's job even harder, talking about herding cats, right? Who's mentioned it? Somebody mentioned that.
I did.
You. And so teams, like Dawn's team, sometimes spend longer than 10 hours on one course trying to come to consensus, whether this is not going to have a credit recommendation or it is, and this is what it is. George talked a lot about the pre-site visit, the review committees that set up the teams, and then you got a sense of the review itself. One of the most interesting aspects to me actually is the exit review, and that's when the team sits with the organization, and then they talk about what and why about the credit recommendations. Would you guys speak a little bit to that and just kind of the learning that takes place, and then with that, and then we'll open it up to questions.
One of the jobs of the coordinator is, of course, at the exit briefing would be to go over the credit recommendations. And the faculty members here at this meeting have an opportunity to give input about what they really liked about a course or where they felt it was weak. And it's not our job to be consultants and tell them how to improve this training or that course or whatever, but it goes on, okay? And the companies really seem to appreciate that, because you've got 3 or 4 faculty members that have looked at your course, and they found what's strong, and they found what's weak, and they found what could be improved, and they tell them that. They said, this would really be better if you did this. And we're not prescribing that or telling them they have to do that, but the companies that really have good training programs and the organizations that really want to get better, they take that information and they say, you're right, we could, that would improve that course. And so they take the benefit of those days that we're spending, and they take that information and they use it to improve their training in their courses. And that's I think one of the real benefits that they get out of it, although that's not our charge to do that. It's kind of a side benefit that the companies do get, and they do seem to appreciate it.
So let me open this up to questions, and don't be shy. Ask away. Yes, please stand and say who you are and where you're from. Rank and serial number.
I was with Augusta State University, we consolidated, now with Georgia Regents University. We sent a faculty member to an ACE workshop. And her concern when she came back and spoke to a committee on campus was not the objectives, not the content, and not the assessments. It was the credentials of the people who were teaching those courses, and what would you say to a faculty member to address that type of concern?
I'll take that one on. I find it really ironic that when we're talking about life learning achievement, that we do what we as academics always do and ask where their PhD came from. I mean, so the first thing that I would say is, and I am not speaking on behalf of ACE or anyone else, or the Board of Regents for the University of Missouri system, but we all know people that have beautiful academic pedigrees and can't teach for anything. Or have, in my issue in healthcare, the closest they came to a patient was standing next to a sick person at the pharmacy. So I have to admit that when I'm doing reviews, I don't know that I mean, I look at those things, and obviously if there is a podiatrist teaching, you know, EEG technology, brainwave technology, I probably might have an issue with that. But I care more, and it's really evident. If y'all have ever looked at your colleagues' works, you look at a syllabus and at course materials, and you learn really quickly what is or is not happening in that class. I care more about what is or isn't happening in that class than if somebody has a master's degree from an Ivy or a PhD from who gives a care university. And I just find it a great irony that in this day and age that we're looking at recognizing students for prior learning, that we pull out the whole, well, where'd you get your PhD from as academics? I just find it very ironic.
Well, let me ask a question before George, because I know George will want to respond to that. Was the concern about the particular university, the level of credential, or both?
The concern was that she felt that the people who were teaching the courses that had been recommended for credit frequently did not have PhDs or credentials that she considered worthy of an instructor. And she was very outspoken about the fact that she had earned her PhD, and she didn't see why these people that were teaching these courses didn't necessarily have to have PhDs or credentials that she considered appropriate. Or she didn't know positively what type of credentials these people had.
Okay. Generally, for a course to get undergraduate credit, you know, we're looking for the person to have an undergraduate degree and many years of experience in that particular field, or a master's degree. For graduate credit, it's the person teaching must have a master's or PhD or JD. If they have a master's degree, then we're looking to see their level of experience in that field also. So it's one of the things that we are looking for now is, you know, who's teaching it and what is their educational attainment. So sometimes we find PhDs. I mean, there are, you know, we'll do a review at NASA, and it's pretty easy to find PhDs teaching classes there. But it's not, you know, it's not widespread. So there's a lot of corporate training that's going on with people that have undergraduate degrees and lots of experience to get undergraduate credit recommendation for that course, or a master's degree and lots of experience.
I got the sense that she didn't consider that sufficient.
Okay.
Well, that was probably her Alamo. You know, we all have a hill we're willing to die on, and that was probably her Alamo.
Yeah. And maybe she's off that hill now, and somebody who's willing to do something
Right.
will get on that hill. 25 years, I was in another state 25 years ago, not anywhere near this state. This state wouldn't do this. But 25 years ago, there was the same discussion going. It was at a community college. It was about, and I was in early childhood, about the instructors and the credentials that they had and how to grandfather or grandmother them in because they did not have the PhD and people were looking at more credentials. That same state and that same group of community colleges is having that same discussion now. They have not moved forward on this. Maybe they will one day. Meantime, over 25 years, there are a lot of instructors, and students who've had difficulty because of the way we look at credentials. And so we can look at the post-secondary credential and where it comes from, and then we can also look at, I was listening to Dawn and I was thinking about all the different kinds of experiences she's had in the field. And teaching is one of them, but you think about the range of things she's done so that she knows what's going on in healthcare. I mean, she knows the field. And so that's the kind of person we look for in terms of a reviewer. And that person may have a PhD, as you said, from an Ivy League or from a state college or from a private university, or may not. But we've looked, just like we would look at learners within institutions, we've looked across a range of things. And then the proof is in the pudding. Mm-hmm. Proof is in the pudding in a number of ways. It's in how those reviews stand up over time from those reviewers and how they stand up in terms of how they are applied at universities and how those students do. And, I think that's why it's really important to collect that kind of data. We've all got, one of my most favorite stories is about when I was at Old Dominion University, and we had, obviously there were a whole lot of Navy nuke folks in the area. ACE had not reviewed the Navy nuke program because if, at that point, if the Navy nuke program told you, then they'd have to kill you, right? So you didn't have enough information to make the review. Well, our faculty at Old Dominion in engineering technology decided they were going to figure it out. So they did sort of something like an ACE occupational review. So they talked to the people that were in the program, they talked to the instructors, they read the materials even though, lots of things were marked out. They looked at how they were assessed, and then they gave their own credit recommendations. They mapped it to their appropriate degree programs. And I think a year or so later, ACE did the review, and the two teams, the Old Dominion team and the ACE team, were within 2 or 3 credits of each other, which that's what you would like to see. But the other part of the proof in the pudding was the group of students that went through and how they did. And they were fabulous. The faculty loved them. They came to class. They did their assignments. They were outstanding models to other students. So those, to me, those are all the pieces that we have to go back and pay attention to. Mm-hmm. And so to that faculty person, I would spend X amount of minutes talking about those things, and then I'd move on and find other people that were more receptive and work around her.
And I'm assuming your healthcare, given we deal with people in the healthcare arena. One of the biggest things that I've learned through this process is how unbelievably well educated our servicemen and women are. A big buzzword in healthcare is critical thinking, and how are we going to get them to critically think? And we can't a lot of the time. our servicemen and women are trained to be MacGyver. I mean, they have the critical thinking skills. So when individual issues come up about a specific student, or, you know, there are points of contact at ACE, and I would highly encourage that faculty member or whoever's involved in that decision to seek clarification for the specific course in question. Because, you know, there might be, for a hospital corpsman who works on a sub independently, the person who's educating him might have a bachelor's degree, might have a master's degree, but for, you know, 20 years has been embedded in Delta forces as the medic on that team. I can guarantee you, from my experience and getting down into the weeds with these courses, I would rather have that medic take care of an emergency than one of my BSN graduates. And I have a PhD and 2 master's degrees. So I've got that academic pedigree, but the question has to fundamentally come down to why are you looking at the credit and what is the outcome for that credit? And then, you know, I would mold the discussion towards what's the issue as opposed to the Alamo.
So I think there was a question.
Just a comment. I think this is a very valid point that your colleagues at George Regis bring up.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can ignore it, simply
Right.
because the faculty have to ultimately decide
Absolutely.
what credit
Right.
is important. And we're going to hear from Belle Wheeler in a few minutes, and one of the things that she's going to check us on every time is credentialing.
Mm-hmm.
And a certain component of our courses, large stuff, must have the right faculty credentialing at times. I would say that it's just something you can't, we collectively cannot ignore this. There may be ways to convince some, there may not be ways to convince some. But ultimately, I have to have the majority of the faculty concur
Right.
that this is the right credit choice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And your HLC is going to require that you're held to those standards because your own accrediting is going to hold you to those standards. So it is a factor. It absolutely is a factor. And I don't know, you know, in this one individual who spoke to them or who didn't speak to them.
My concern is it's not one individual.
Right.
There may be, we may have collectively a number of individuals that would hold the same view.
That's true.
Absolutely.
I think one of the things we can do is go back and look at the makeup of the teams in terms of credentials, because just as we use a wide range of different institutions from different disciplines, I would say that probably on a lot of teams, and I'd have to go back and check this, you're going to have a range of credentials as well. And so I think that I hear you on that. I think that's I can keep 2 points in mind and agree with them because I really think what Dawn is saying. But
Some PhDs can't teach, and I also agree with the premise that some individuals know more about their applied area of expertise than the instructors might.
right. But to your point that, I mean, we do live in the real world of credentials and people paying attention to it. And so I think the case that we can make is the makeup of the team and to look at the whole team and everybody that's on it, because there's not just one individual on that team making that decision. And with one discipline, we've got several faculty members from that same discipline. So you're going to, I think for the most part, you're going to see a range of credentials on those teams. And
I think you were talking about the people who teach the courses that are getting credit, not our teams.
Oh,
Not our teams.
okay.
And we do look at instructor qualifications.
Who teaches the course.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, right. Yeah,
And there are various levels, so
Right.
depending upon a lower division or upper division or certain
Right.
grades, there are various expectations.
And it does depend on the course. And I've noticed that on our teams, we have that multitude. So for example, if it's a paramedic course, there's not a 4-year degree in emergency in paramedics. So the people who teach the course are probably going to be associate's degree educated or baccalaureate educated because it's an associate's degree program. And so when you look at the teams, we may have a baccalaureate educated paramedic on the team, and then I'm bringing the perspective of the graduate educated nurse, because that same anatomy and physiology or that same pharmacology credit could be used for an EMT, could be used for a nurse, could be used for a biology major. And I've never been on a team that did not have that, that actually didn't lean heavy on the doctorally educated side.
I think, I apologize, my question has been absorbed by the question raised earlier.
Okay.
It was going to be, what about SACS requirements for teaching? The credentials from SACS? What about those?
Well, those are credentials for teaching at a higher education institution. SACS credentials deal with institutions. They don't deal with the qualifications for people teaching in extra institutional programs.
But I think there is an overlap because you're giving credit. You're giving credits, undergrad credits.
I don't know that SACS sees that as an issue, because in their regs, they use ACE as an example of a third-party validator that they recognize.
May I just remind you that Dr. Bell Whelan will be speaking at 4 o'clock. Dr. Whelan is president of SACS COC, SACS Commission on Colleges. And if you look, sir, behind to your left, she can wave to you. No, your left, your other left. There you go.
Oh, we have a question in the back.
There's one thing that all of you have to remember, even on the faculty side, I'm a registrar. So we have been mandated by some, just thinking about the technical colleges, the new gen ed requirements, we can't look at them. We have to transcribe them in. We can't look at the faculty, whether they have the credentials to teach those at the technical schools. This is what we were told to do. So some of what we have to do, there's no options. And so we kind of have to think a little bit along the lines of what we're, and especially in this group, the ALC, that yes, upper level division stuff, but there's a lot of gen ed stuff that yes, we question, but we really can't question anymore.
I'd like to ask about credit for online courses, massive and otherwise. You mentioned earlier about the experiment that we've been through in several courses offered through on the Coursera platform. And I wonder what considerations extra considerations you place, if any, on authentication of the students and whether these are proctored courses. I mean, when you have 40,000 or more students registered for a class, the general state of practice at the moment is to have students grade each other, and so therefore the model of assessment that's used doesn't directly translate into the awarding of credit unless you take extra steps.
With these 5 courses, we kicked the can down the road on the peer-to-peer assessment. And so we are looking at, we were actually reviewing the more traditional type assessments. And those are still, the peer-to-peer is still part of that, but we were looking at the more traditional assessments at this point.
So these 5 courses were all assessed by an instructor, proctored in line?
We are using or they are using what's called uProctor. Yeah, and so there are registrars upon registrars authenticating. So from uProctor to Coursera to ACE, we have our own registrar. And so we did pay extra special attention to that. Coursera did too. Coursera's already had a lot of success, but it's had a recent embarrassment with a course that at Georgia Tech. And so, everybody is aware of, if 40,000 people are taking a course, things can go wrong and they can get out in a big way, not like when you're teaching 30 people in your own class. So there are a lot of there are a lot of reasons, academic integrity being the main one that we want to pay attention to, but also we're going to learn things along the way. We're probably going to see something doesn't work as well as something else, and as we do, then we have these conversations. We had some really good conversations with Casera about what works and what doesn't work so far with assessment. So as you say, this is an experiment, and we are learning. And the next round, we'll have to look at the peer-to-peer assessment, because that's such a big part of it, and see how do we add that to what we're looking at in terms of assessment. Yeah.
I think we're out of time.
Do it. One more question. Okay.
I was wondering how often these courses are reviewed on some kind of cyclical basis.
Cyclical, definitely, every 3 years on the corporate side, because we know that in these fields the training is changing rapidly. Even before 3 years, if there's some changes, they need to come to us and let us know. George, did you want to?
No, just the
Okay.
3 years.
Military side is more driven by mission. You want to speak more to that?
Sure. On the military side, our recommendations will stand for 10 years, but technology changes, our military's mission changes. When those things happen, they're resubmitted to us for review. Some of them come up for review every 2 years. The Marine Corps, they've got a cycle every 3 years. They want theirs relooked at. And so that's a system that has stood for many years, and I think you're going to see it evolving as well for short periods of time, because, I mean, everything's speeding up, essentially, to keep it current.
Well, one more.
Like corporate or company, what all are you talking about? Like military or?
Well,
Who else getting reviewed?
Well, over the years, on the corporate side, we've had over 600 organizations. Currently, we have 200 organizations. So in the past, we've reviewed companies like Delta, okay? And right now, we're reviewing companies like Starbucks has a management program, Hamburger University, but McDonald's, a lot of professional associations. George mentioned some of them. And so did Dawn. So healthcare professional associations like AHIMA, police academies, apprenticeship programs, CLEP, AP, what else? What am I leaving out? American Bankers Association, FAA, IRS.
Disney,
Well,
yeah. NASA.
What the faculty reviewers, they're going to review those courses to see what college credits go in, and it's the standard. If you've looked at Delta, they, I don't know, if it's the management class, then that management class can come into any USG school, like is it the credit transfer?
Well, no, go ahead. If you want to speak to that.
And that's where I said that's where they pay special attention to the teams, because it's our job to look at it from a national perspective. I'm not looking at it according to how we do it in the Midwest or how we do it at the UM system. Nationally, what are the standards? And that's why, as George stated earlier, they pull faculty members from multiple institutions, from multiple regions in the country. Because if we look at McDonald's University, which doesn't have healthcare, so I haven't done it. At least I hope they don't. That'd be another little ironic thing. But whatever credit that would come into play there would be based upon current standards for leadership and management at a national level for post-secondary education.
And then of the institutions, I mean, not all institutions have the same name, of course, number on class.
Right. But again, that's what I was saying, that's where they've paid special attention. Like, for example, I'm very intimately aware of nursing accreditation standards. I do not bring those to the table with ACE. However, I know that all nursing programs need to have these courses. Now, what you flavor it as and how you sequence it, there's some variation to that. But those credit recommendations that then get that get made are made based upon those faculty members' intimate knowledge of the national standards for those degree programs. So I would assume that and this is an assumption, but that management courses, there are certain standard concepts that have to be covered in certain courses, that there's, whatever your traditional 101, 102 courses or 301 or 302 courses are. And because they bring faculty members to the table that are educators that are actively teaching, they're aware of what those standards are. So, and that's why you'll often see, if you look back on the transcripts, that the credits have changed substantially. Like one of the examples that I give a lot is I'll get a hold of a course that has 6 credits in data entry and keyboarding. Well, 10 years ago, we had college courses on typing. 2-year-olds can type now. We don't do that anymore. So that right there would automatically be 6 credits that is no longer applicable in today's modern academic setting. So if there's a concept in management that is so universally known that you don't have to have a separate course in it, but we did 15 years ago, that, it's not my area, but do you see what I'm saying?
We actually are going to get into that specifically tomorrow. That's our session tomorrow, where we'll give some examples and talk through those. Yeah.
So since we don't have time for next steps, one of your next step could come tomorrow, would be to
And
come
do
tomorrow
review in a
and do the
box.
review in the box. So thank you very much.